Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, Kushalmehra. Okay, today we're going to be talking about what's happening in France. So, for those who don't know, there are riots in France right now, and I was just observing it from outside. I could have done a podcast a while ago, but I did not because I wanted to wait for all kinds of news to come out. And then I reached out to Catherine. And Catherine was nice enough to say yes to come on the podcast. For those who don't know, Catherine is a journalist, political analyst, and commentator. She's been on the Cārvāka podcast before. So, Catherine, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I always say yes when you ask me to come on. It's always a pleasure.
So, Catherine, let's start with this. We will begin with the assumption that people in India do not know what's happening in France right now,
Mhm.
or was happening in France. So, what has gone down in the last few weeks? Let us start from the baseline where with the actual narration of events, how it all started, the current riots.
Well, look, so the riots did not just happen in a vacuum. There was an incident with a police officer where a young man, 17 years old at the time, was driving without a license, and he's just not allowed to drive because he's not 18. But anyway, he didn't have a learning permit. He was putting several people in danger. You had cyclists, you had pedestrians walking around, and so the police stopped him. They found out that he didn't have his papers. And he also has, a long list of, previous, petty crimes, but, some of them were quite violent. And so naturally, they felt that, it could escalate. And so they took, precautions and measures to make sure that that would not happen. And unfortunately, the young man was shot in the chest and died. And on the back of this, it was an absolute explosion of violence where people felt that it was a murder, that the police officer had no right whatsoever to shoot this young man, that it was an outrage, and that something had to be done. And it boiled over, where within 24 hours of that, people descended into the streets and started burning, breaking, attacking, killing, people, the streets, and the entire country was set on fire. I mean, it started in the northern suburb of Paris, which is called Nanterre, where you have a lot of council estate. Is actually quite massive, and it boiled over to the entire country. And you had several cities literally burning, from Marseille to Lyon to Poitiers. I mean, all the big cities in France. Violence in the streets. A mayor was actually attacked in his home at his residence. His house was set on fire. He wasn't there at the time. His wife and two children were, and they had to escape through the flame, where they were trying to literally burn them alive, knowing fully well that they were there. And the young mother, and can you imagine? I mean, the children were something like 6 and 8 years old, a little girl and a little boy, and the mom almost lost her life trying to save her children. I mean, through the flame, she had to escape through the flame. Her knees were shattered, so now she's in hospital. She won't be able to walk for 6 months. And the little girl got an injury. She cut her eye. And the notion that people could get, I can understand that people would get angry. But to get angry to the point where you would be willing to burn people alive, children, a mother and her two children, who had nothing to do with the situation, who could not possibly be held accountable or even responsible for anything because it had nothing to do with them, to feel that, that kind of hatred for, I would say, France, the Republic, the institutions, the state, would translate into that kind of violence. And the fact that people have tried to rationalize it and justify it, saying like they represent, you chose to cause harm to a family that has done nothing wrong. They are the definition of innocence. For me, is crossed the line. To see Paris being completely defaced. Where you had slogan saying kind of excuse my French, but like fuck the Republic. That kind of profanities is just despicable. For people to come to France, or even being born in France, but having that kind of reaction against the state, which for me is an iteration of treason. I don't like to say the word, but it is, because if you feel that kind of hatred for a country that you were born in or came to, you need to ask yourself, why are you there? Because and also, why is it that you feel that you need to express that anger through violence when you could, it's a democracy. You have plenty of avenues to kind of try to work out reforms, to try to express different views or propose solution. That's For me, that's the main problem, is that rather than say there's something wrong with the system, we need to work together to fix, to fix the problem. No, they chose violence, and they chose to actually stand against the state rather than say we're going to stand with you against the problem. Let's find a solution together. They refused to do that. What they wanted to do was to literally bring down the republic, and cause tremendous harm to millions of innocent people. Can you imagine? I mean, the businesses that were looted, people who had nothing to do with anything could not use public transport because buses were burned. The government had to issue a curfew and prevent trains from working their normal hours. That means that people couldn't get work. That means that nurses couldn't get to hospitals. That means that doctors couldn't get to their patients. There's so many things, and they didn't care. They didn't care that actually you're causing harm to millions of businesses, people who make a living and are really trying really hard, to rebuild things, on the back of COVID. This for them could be the thing that just put them under, and they completely disrespect. They complete disregard to other people's, lives, livelihood, welfare. Children couldn't go to school. They literally burn schools, theaters. Sports center, everything and anything. They even attacked a zoo and freed the animals. Yeah. They set fires to, we have centers in France where you have refuges for animals. They literally set fire to that. Why? What did cats
What
go?
did the animals do to them?
Exactly, but that's exactly that, and it's just so upsetting when you see people, who do care about animal rights and in trying to, to give those animals like a good home and trying to look after them, and people come and set fire to it. Why? I mean, what is the message? And it's just, and this happened. It was really upsetting for me because I'm French, born and raised in Paris, and it's my city. I love my country. I'm very critical of France a lot of the time, but because I love my country, so I wanted to do better. But destruction, no, I can't. Nobody can sanction this. You can't agree. And some people again have tried, to be, demagogues and saying, oh no, it's the state's fault. No, that kind of violence cannot be justified ever. And look, I'm not saying that the police officer was right, because clearly not. A young man died. So, but I wasn't there. I'm not a judge. I don't know exactly what went on. I don't know what is the code of conduct when it comes to that kind of situation. Why can't we agree to let justice take its course and actually wait for the judge to decide exactly what happens? Because people have opinions, but they don't know. They don't know because you were not there. You're not a lawyer. You're not part of the judicial system. Let justice take its course. Because I think that jumping to the gun and saying that they want to hang that police officer, why? We don't know what happened. All we hear is like hear and say. It's like secondhand information. And I think it's so dangerous for people to feel that because it's on social media, oh, I know what happened. I saw it with my eyes. Well, I have news for you. Sometimes seeing is actually it's not enough, because it's not rational. Because there's a lot of bias that get into it. And first of all, what exactly do you think you saw? You don't know because you weren't there. And even people who were there, you need to have context to everything. And I think that just, again, jumping, to conclusion and saying he's a police officer, therefore he's guilty, is just too easy. For me, it's a coping mechanism.
Do you think this whole hostility towards the police now, like, for the record, even I think a 17-year-old being shot by a cop is
It's wrong.
obviously is wrong, and it's abhorrent. And
Mm.
but but civilized countries have rules and rule of law, and they have due process.
Mm-hmm.
You can protest, you can go to designated spaces and take your placards and protest and shout slogans, but that's how civilized people would respond to this, and then demand for a robust investigation and justice. But now, if I was to ask someone from the side which is going to give an apologia for the riots, they would say, but that's where France has failed. They have not treated its minorities well. So how does one respond to that?
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true, because look, the usual argument, and I've heard it. I mean, I've heard it for decades, actually. Where people were saying, the suburbs of Paris, or whichever big city, are poor, which is true. which is true. You have a lot of people who, kind of like live under, I would say, like the threshold. Like, I mean, they're under the breadline and they do struggle. That's a reality. But we also have invested over the past 30 years, 90 billion euros, which is quite a lot of money, that was actually pulled out from everywhere else and poured into, the suburbs of Paris and other big cities to cater to that particular demographic. So the fact that, for them to say, there's not enough resources, that's not true. To also say that they lack access, that's not true. In France, you have, and those are facts. I'm not trying to say, that it's they're lying, but I think like these, they don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to realize that they had every opportunity to get out of this situation if they had wanted to. In France, you have free education, free healthcare. And when I say free education, I'm not just talking about, primary and high school. I'm talking all the way to get to your PhD. It's free. You have free education all the way in France. It's not like
PhD.
work. Yeah, essentially, yes.
Oh,
you get all the way. You don't pay for anything. You don't pay for, I mean, you pay a little bit. I mean, you have to register, but it's not going to break the bank. I promise you. Like, everyone can afford it.
Wow.
So you have free education, free healthcare, and on top of it, you have social benefits. If people lose their job, if they have a disability, if they have many children, the government is there and steps up and helps. Maybe it's not enough, but again, we're facing our economic realities, and so the government is doing as much as it can. France is a very socialist country. I mean, we have a socialist history, so people are protected. They have social rights. So she said that they don't have enough. Well, they have exactly what other peoples have. That's the thing. So it's not like there's a concerted effort in France where they say, well, if you're coming from, an immigrant background, you're going to have less. That's not true. You have exactly what other people will have. And if anything, more resources have been poured into the suburbs, to try to, to answer, I would say, the anger that was coming out of the suburbs with young people saying that they didn't have enough, access, that they didn't have the same chances as everybody else. But that's not true anymore. It might have been true at some point that, yes, there was kind of a lack, I would say, of organization in terms of how do we help them? How do we help, support, their life and to try to, give them sports centers and, access to theaters and cinemas and all those things that, just make your life better and enrich it. But that's not true. They were given those opportunities, but a lot of the time they chose not to. For whatever reason, they chose, at some point in time, you have to understand that the state doesn't owe you everything. It owes you, a certain, I would say, social security in terms of like the state should pick you up when you're going through a hard time. But you still, as an individual, you have a responsibility to actually, pick yourself up and actually go look for those opportunities. But for some reason, they feel that they're so entitled that they want all the privileges without having to put any of the work in. And that's not okay. Because people in France, regardless of their skin color or their faith, do make it. A lot of people do make it. A lot of, first generation immigrants are very successful in France. So my question is, why is it that they're not? At some point in time, they're going to have to, think, is there something that I'm not doing? Or, what is it that I could change about myself to make sure that, I do better in life? Because the state is not responsible for your failures. There's a point in time where, it's just like when you raise children, there's a point in time when they're going to have to fly away from the nest. And whatever it is that they do, it's on them. You can't blame parents forever for the failure of the children. At some point, they grow up, they leave, and they're going to make their own mistakes or succeed. It doesn't matter, but it's on them. It's not on the parents anymore. You're there to provide a structure.
On a lighter note, Indian children can.
Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Is that, the state,
I agree with you,
providing a structure, and then at some point in time, well, look, if you fail as an individual, it's on you. But don't blame society. I think it's just, again, it's just it's a cop-out. It's just to say, I'm not responsible. Yes, you are. Because you're an individual. You get 2 legs, 2 arms, and you can go to work, and you could do this. And if you don't like your situation, get out of it. And if you don't like it, try harder. And I know it sucks, but that's what it means to be an adult. It's not fun, but you can't infantilize people until when? So the state has to do everything for them? Do you want to have a nanny state? And how do you sustain this? Like, I mean, are they contributing to society? often the answer is no. They choose violence. And as you see, like rather than try to say, let's engage with the state, let's try to find solution. How do we make it better? No, they break, they burn, they kill. So what's the message? What are you trying to say exactly? That you don't love this country? Clearly, we got the message. We hear you, and it created a backlash in France. It's quite interesting because you have now, I would say, a resurgence of nationalism. I would say the healthy kind of nationalism where people actually took offense, saying, "Hang on a second, I don't want to see my flag burn in France." And it's not to say, this is not saying, oh, we are racist, we're white nationalists. No. People are proud to be French. And there's, it's when you're French and you've been raised in France and it's your country, and I'm sure you share this, about India, you're very proud of where you come from. It doesn't mean you're not aware of the flaws of that place, but you're still proud. This is your place, this is your home, you want to make it better. To see people literally trash it and shit on it is actually hurtful. A lot of people in France took offense. And by the way, across, all demographics. So it's not like it's a white thing. We're talking about, France from, of African descent, of Asian descent. It doesn't matter. They all took offense, saying, hang on a second, this is where I live. This is my home. My kids go to school here. What are you doing? You're destroying everything for everybody else.
They burnt a library down. Who burns libraries down?
Oh, they burn everything. I mean, look, cinemas. I mean, they went. Look, they went to Champs-Élysées and literally attacked Louis Vuitton. They attacked supermarkets. They attacked. I mean, what are you doing? What are you doing? Was for me. It was literally kind of open season on. Let's go help ourselves to what we can't afford because they're not. I mean, they can't do anything now because we have the numbers on our side. I think that's what it was. They decided that society somehow owed them something, and so they went and get it. It doesn't work this way. Society doesn't owe you anything. Life doesn't owe you shit.
I have a question here. How did the French state, I mean the French government, allow this? Because do you think if there was any other group or any other ethnicity that would have tried to try something like this, do you think the state response would have been now I know the state is responding right now, where people may not want to believe it, but the state is responding right now. And I have huge problems with the response right now. And we will discuss the response of the state and some of the news, like some of the things the French state has just passed, like the law I read, that scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
I'm like, holy moly, what have you just passed? Like, to deal with problem A, you have just thrown the kitchen sink at it, but that's second. But do you think, who's going to hold the French state responsible? Because why did they let the riots to go to this extent? Or was it politically convenient?
I think a little bit of both. I think that they wanted to, I mean, look, when there's a crisis, I think that, by the way, I think that this crisis, however, violent and horrible for everybody else in France, I think was some kind of a welcome relief to Macron because he wasn't exactly popular. I mean, he's done well, think about it. Think about it for a second. I mean, it's nobody was like, talking about him and, should he stay or should he go anymore because they were busy talking about the riots. I mean, he was literally on the hot seat just a few weeks ago because people were very angry with him. He literally bypassed the National Assembly and tried to rewrite the Constitution, quite literally. So for me, I can't believe that he's done what he's done. He literally, took our democracy and like literally just said like, nah, I'm just going to do things my way. It doesn't work like this. France is a very democratic country. Don't do that. We have a constitution. You can't just like force a law, especially when the people in the street are telling you they don't want it. He's the president of the people. He's not like appointed by God or, some kind of a party line. He's appointed by the people directly. So
and you have to should know it even more.
Didn't
your people lose lives over this? Like you guys literally had the bloodiest revolution.
I know, but that's what people were trying to remind him that, the last time that somebody tried to play king, he lost his head. And I mean, they were not threatening his life, but they were just trying to make a point that, in France, we do take offense when people are trying to take away our rights and the democracy that we fought so dearly for. It's something that is literally, I think like, it's like, DNA now. We take offense and, we tend to be a bit rowdy. So we tend to let, Everyone knows. I mean, look, the French have like it's a national sport. It's just to demonstrate and to go to the streets and to start screaming. But that's the way we do things, and it worked. I mean, look, the last time we had a crisis like this back in 1968, De Gaulle, who was president at the time, had actually the good mind of quitting. He understood. He understood that France is a republic, that we have to protect our democracy, even if that means that the president has to go. If you lost legitimacy, just go, because you're not serving your country anymore. And the problem is, I think that Macron lacks that kind of, I would say, moral fiber. He loves his career more than he loves his country, and I think it's sad to see, especially from a president. And now he's like, I think his popularity is kind of gaining ground in the sense that people need him right now, and he's he appears to be doing what they want, which is to stop the riots, because people are scared. They were running scared because it was getting out of hand, and I think that helped him a great deal, and also it allowed him to to be pushing through a few laws that otherwise would have literally set the country on fire. So I think to some extent they saw an opportunity. I'm not saying that they architected or engineered that crisis. It's like, I don't want to give into the whole conspiracy theory, but I think it was a very convenient vehicle to push certain things through and to accelerate the program. That's what I'm going to say. But yeah.
So was there like a past precedent to this? Because like you said, like France has a culture of protesting, but like
yeah, but
this
not
level.
violently like that. I mean, there's protesting in the street, and then there's like rioting. There's a line. I mean, it's not like we are rowdy, but we don't. I mean, we don't start setting things on fire just because it's fun. That was a riot. That was. I mean, look, people talk about civil war. There was like, I think that there was a moment where people were thinking, hang on a second, like this is morphing into something very dangerous, because we're not just talking about violence in some areas. It was spreading across the country. The country was set on fire, literally on fire. And I think there was a fear that it would turn into something else. There was a fear. But yes, there's been incidents in the suburbs also. It was under the presidency of Nicolas Sarkozy a few years back, and he had to call the military. But it was very localized at the time, but he had to call the military because they were using weapons against the police, and the police at the time was not armed properly. And so they had to send the military, which is why a few laws were passed in France to to allow police officers to have more weapons, and to have I would say a margin of movement that is greater than it was before, in order to address the kind of threats that they were under, because some areas in France, for example, were completely barred from the police, in the sense that they were so scared to get in, because they knew that people had weapons that they didn't have access to themselves, and then they couldn't guarantee their own safety, and so they just decided to not go, which was a problem, because obviously the police need to be able to go everywhere to make sure that the rule of law is applied everywhere. So new laws were set in place, and the problem is, it's like with everything, is like if you start to harshen your tone because you're trying to address a crisis or a threat, that means that you come a bit heavy-handed. I mean, the police has more rights and more weapons, and they tend to be a bit more trigger happy, and then those things happen. So, but how do you? It's a balancing act, and I think that again, it's too easy to say the state is at fault. Yes, partly, but there's a dynamic here. It's not the state just again operating in a vacuum and just shooting people because it's fun. It's not. That's not that. There's it's a reaction too. So now the problem we have is that how do we make sure, saying we're going to take the guns away from the police, that's not a solution. Because then how do you address the mounting threat that they're facing, right? Because then you're putting them in danger. So what we need to address is actually like, what is the real problem behind, the shooting and the guns holding and the laws, is the violence. How do we stop the violence? How do we make sure that people, again, learn that, number one, there are consequences, dire consequences to acting like a buffoon. And that you can't just threaten people's lives or put people's life in danger, or go after people's property. You can't do this, and make sure that whatever upset they feel is expressed in a way that is, I would say, constructive and leads to change, positive change, not just because screaming for screaming is too easy. Like, what are you trying to say? Because we still don't know what they were saying, other than say we want justice. Well, you burning and killing people doesn't scream justice to me, but okay, let's go with justice. And also, what does it mean? Justice, like what kind of justice do you want? Because right now it's like an eye for an eye. And that's not okay. It's not even an eye for an eye, because they literally went after, people who had nothing to do with anything. A firefighter was killed. A firefighter. His entire purpose in life is to help you. He doesn't arrest you. He doesn't challenge you. He doesn't. You don't call the firefighters if there's like a fight in the street. No, he comes after to help you. To take you to hospital, regardless of where you come from, whether you have your papers, whether you're legal, whether brown, blue, with spots. He doesn't care. His job is in service of the people. Why would you kill him? What did he do? But he has a uniform. So, and for me, it's can you imagine someone who literally spent his life in service of other people at the worst time in their lives? The person that you want to see quick, if something happens in your household, like you want them to come quickly. They targeted those people, and for me, that's just beyond. It's just there's no excuses, no explanation, and it's just like no. You can't tolerate this, because it's like, can you imagine if they start going after nurses too? What are you doing?
Nurses?
No, they didn't go after nurses, but I'm just trying to say it's the same thing. Like if suddenly they decide
Oh,
to say,
okay.
oh, we're going to turn on
I was like,
nurses. What is the
yeah.
rationale in you thinking? Like, why would you do this? But
Well,
people are saying, oh, they're eyeing.
the mob has no intelligence.
But that's the problem. But I disagree. I disagree in the sense that maybe no intelligence, but there's definitely a will. There's definitely an engine behind it, because
Yes.
I don't believe that. Look, when you have this youth, the way that they moved, the way that it spread, this is something. It doesn't happen. So I think it's like we're talking about decades of indoctrination, and I'm not talking about religious indoctrination. I'm talking about political indoctrination. The thought that we put into these people's heads, again, that they are entitled without the accountability that comes with it. That again, France owes them something, that somehow the state is the enemy. Why would the state be the enemy? Why would you automatically view the authority as something to be to be hated? Why how is that helpful? And I think that's exactly what certain people and certain actors wanted to do. I mean, look, we have people who literally every day scream against our democracies, saying that they want to lay waste to our democracies. And I think that we haven't woken up to the fact that certain powers and actors are actually, acting from within, eroding at our democratic institutions by rewriting people's mind and making sure that the enemy is not without, but within. Because, the best way to set a country on fire is not by attacking it, from the outside, it's from within. Because how do you fight that? It's very difficult.
Well, do you think the American culture wars are also kind of now being aped in other parts of the world, as in the modus operandi? If you remember the Black Lives Matter protest
Mm.
post the the killing of, I forgot the African American
George
who was
Floyd.
George Floyd, yeah,
Mm.
who was who was basically murdered in the process of restraining him by an American police officer.
Mm.
Now, and the riots that erupted after that, and how certain cities in America, the where it was quite clear, even during peak COVID, the authorities just let people riot. Do you think it has now become a thing now where culture wars and their patterns are now being seen to be visible across the world, or it's just the nature of democracy where democracies tend to have more restraint and they let go of these things? But do you think as a long-term strategy this is a viable way of just the idea is a politician might think let people vent, but vent till what extent?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, look, I mean, America is quite violent. It always has been violent. The police is quite heavy-handed. I mean, it's a culture. So I'm not surprised that when you engage people, with that kind of frequency, obviously, like, they're going to push back with the same, I would say, level of aggression. Now, the French police has always been quite heavy-handed too. I mean, the French are not. They're not the Brits. The Brits are very polite. I mean, they do things very differently. In France, they're quite aggressive. I mean, it's just part of the culture. So I think that people who are critical of that, I can understand where they're coming from. At the same time, you need to understand the context and the culture. I'm not trying to justify it, but that's the reality. Every country I think has its own kind of like, idiosyncrasies, and this is one of them. The French tend to be, again, a bit rowdy, and so I think that the police, automatically had to kind of match that. And sometimes, well, it's people see that as I'm not saying that we're used to it as French people, but it's expected. And I think that it played, in this. And also, look, I think that because you had a lot of young, I mean, it's sad to say, but young Muslims out, coming from an immigrant background. I think that a lot of the authorities did not know what to do because they didn't want to play into the narrative that they're being Islamophobic, that they're being racist, and that they're targeting a demographic that is seen as in crisis, the underdogs of society, or the disenfranchised of society, and that they didn't want to kind of, again, allow ideologues to turn around and say, hey, we told you so. We told you that there was this clash of civilization, there was this war against you, because that wasn't the case. I mean, the police had to react to the violence because they had to. They have to protect, people. And again, if someone, breaks the law, well, you're going to have to answer to your actions. And it's unfortunate that, this demographic decided to just do that, but they did. And so we need to ask ourselves the question, number one, why? Number two, why is it that they felt entitled to do that, to express their anger that way? Because there's always a better way. And also, there's a way of thinking, that there's a worldview that has led to this. And until we address it, it's not going to get better. So we can talk about immigration all day. We can talk about integration all day. It's not going to help at all until we actually, talk about the elephant in the room, which is that we have millions of people in France who hate that country and hate the Republic and hate everything that France represents. And that comes from somewhere and someone.
So I was just trying to understand this unfortunate shooting of this young kid. So this kid was of Moroccan and Algerian descent, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's where the kid comes from. Now, now let us talk about the French state and the. I mean, I'm just shocked. I just saw a news report, and tell me if this is correct or not. This was published in a mainstream Indian portal, not like some dinky ass, crazy portal. This is the Economic Times, like probably one of the largest Indian portals. And when I read this, I was like, holy moly, what in the living world is the French government thinking? So basically, what this report says is it is allowing police to spy through phones.
Mm. Well,
What in the world?
they actually, I think you missed it, because there was a gentleman at the National Assembly that stood up and addressed everyone, saying that now they would be using social media and to track down people, because a lot of the rioting was organized through social media, Snapchat, that kind of thing. And so that they were going to have a conversation, with those social media to track down their IP address, and make sure also that they would be able to to basically get into their phone, to establish guilt, and to collect evidence, which has never been done. I mean, yeah, I'm sure it has been done before, but we didn't know, and that they kind of came out with this, saying that those are the tools that we're going to employ. So I would say, on the one hand, you would say, it seems natural for a state to want to use whatever tools they have at their disposal to crack down on that kind of thing. But obviously, then you have, like, how does it apply to everyday life? Because obviously, that, again, it's just like one extra violation of, I would say, our privacy, or personal rights, in terms of, like, we could be snooped on without our knowledge. The implications are grave. Yeah, it's a problem. But it has gone on for a bit. I think the problem is we're very naive when it comes to, because look, technology is not good or bad. It is technology, but it depends who's using it. And obviously, with all the we have GPS, we kids, we have access to all those different things. That means that that could be used against you. It's very we basically, I think that what we need to understand is that by in order to have access to more technology, every time that something is convenient for us to use, we are trading a bit of our freedom. We need to be aware of it. It's just a reality, and we need to we need to have a conversation around this. Not to say technology is bad. It's not bad. It's good. but how do we find a framework that actually allow us to, rethink our freedom? Because I think that we actually need to rethink them, because you can't deny that this is the reality. So how do we work with it? How do we reposition ourselves and understand our freedom better, and also make sure that there's no, that the rights that the government wants to kind of give itself, or the legal system, is being done in a way that there's some checks and balances, that it can't just be done like that. Because
So,
to say we can stop it, you can't stop it. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. That technology has allowed this to happen, therefore it will. So how do we make sure that there's some kind of a garde-fou, as we say in French, just like check and balances, to make sure that the genie doesn't just go crazy on you and turn nuclear.
so I mean, look, I lean libertarian. So for me, this is so disturbing.
Yeah.
Before somebody says, oh, the Indian state is also very authoritarian. So before someone says, what are you telling the French about? No, no, I'm just talking as my libertarian senses kick in. Every time I read something like this, my red alert goes,
Yeah.
wait, the state can literally, and this is coming from a center left political outfit,
Yeah, that's crazy,
not a
right?
right wing political outfit. The
Oh,
left
I
in
know.
France is doing this. I mean, the justice minister, I was reading his comments. What is his name? Eric Dupont, right?
Mhm.
Moretti, right? So he's saying, I mean, and I want to quote the gentleman here. I was like, what? And this is like during a debate on Wednesday. There are MPs in President Emmanuel Macron's camp that they are. This is for a strictly proportional duration. What does that even mean?
Well, exactly. That
What?
exactly. But look, it's like, look, they were talking about in France too, and nobody picked up on it, because I went on social media and I kind of like throw a bone, and no people were like, oh no, it doesn't matter. I was like, yeah, it does, because they were talking about invoking a state of emergency in France. The problem is when you invoke a state of emergency in France, because we don't have per se a state of emergency, but you have two articles, it's 16 and 36, that gives basically the president a lot more powers. The problem is the last article, 36, doesn't tell you for how long. And that's the problem, because state of emergency until when. So I think that, again, we need to revisit some of our articles in the Constitution to make sure that, again, the society has evolved where we have threats that we could not anticipate 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago, but now they are a reality. But we haven't
Has
updated anything.
has Macron lost his bearings? Because he does realize that now one set of French people are coming on the streets because they're writing. Does he want the other set now to come on the streets and say, "You're getting in my cell phones now"? Because French people are
I
not going to
don't.
take
Here's the
this lying
thing.
down, right?
Here's the thing. I think that the French right now are so, I would say, angry and unsettled by what just happened, because it was very unsettling. To see that suddenly people were talking about a civil war, and they were not kidding, and not in the sense that they imagine that they're going to start like you're going to have like shootout in the streets. I mean, in the sense that you had a certain demographic in the country that wants to take the republic down, and they got scared, thinking like, what are we doing? What is going on? Like, what is happening? They didn't realize that there was that kind of animosity. They knew there was a certain malaise, that people were, there's poverty, there's issues in France, a lot of issues, but they never realized that those problems, led to such hatred towards the republic. Not politicians, not political parties, the actual country, the republic, what it means to be French. They didn't realize that there was that much hatred against the flag, and I think it really shook them, because the French are very political in the sense that they always argue about politics, but it's always you know, in respect, with a lot of love and affection and respect for the French Republic. There's a line from that you never cross. And that was crossed. And I think you shook people to their core, because again, people will critique Macron up and down every day, all the time. They love doing this, they criticize everybody all the time. But they will never ever turn around and say, we hate the Republic, because this is something, it's an act of apostasy in France to do that, because they'll be like, what are you talking about? We fought for our freedom. We love the Republic. The French are really proud of the Republic. It's not perfect, but we love it. And so to have people come out like this and challenge that in such a violent public way was very unsettling. And I think that they're so shocked and trying to wrap their mind around this, that actually right now you could just like do whatever. I don't think they will notice. if I'm honest with you. And look, no one has picked up on it because people are busy trying to rebuild their lives right now.
Now I want to talk about how these riots were covered. Now I'll tell you why these riots took the attention of a huge section of India, because
Mm-hmm.
they were barely covered. Right
Really
now, I'm in Canada and in America. I can tell you the American media and the Canadian media has barely covered this. They don't cover. They
interesting.
don't cover. If something like this would have happened in India and the Indian government would have passed a law, I can saying I will enter your cell phone and see everything, I can guarantee you the French would be chiding us. The
Yeah.
British would be like, "Oh my God,
The
democracy is in
UN,
danger." The
the
UN
United
would be,
Nations.
yeah, would be giving us lessons. The American, who's that guy? I forgot his name. The current ambassador to India. He's very irritating. He goes in tuk-tuk rides. He goes and meets Bollywood people. And me as an Indian, I was like, "Shut the fuck up, man! Just go and sit and you do your job. You fucking moron, going around walking and doing all these stupid dances." It's very irritating for me. And everybody would have lectured us.
Yep.
France has like gone the
Yep.
whole hog. They just
Yep.
took a ramrod and shove it up their citizens' ass,
Yep.
and nobody talks about it.
Oh no,
Eric
because
Garcetti is the American ambassador. I fucking hate that guy. Sorry about my swearing. He just
ah, no, go
gets
for
to
it.
me. Just gets to me, that guy.
But you're right. Do you know, this is actually, let me, and I know you heard of it, but there was one incident that really get to me because I was thinking, I mean, the bias that people hold is just like, it's so blatant, they're actually not even aware of it because it's so big now that it's just like they're completely blind to it. But I was thinking the nerve of some people where, look, in France, violence was happening on both sides, by the way, because the police was very heavy-handed. And I mean, those things are not, like you would have expected a lot of people, especially like European countries or Western democracies, to come out and tell the front like you need, I mean, say something, along the lines, exert restraint, be careful, like I don't know, don't kill your citizens, that kind of thing, or I don't know, any kind of a comment on what was happening in the streets of Paris, because unheard of, the country was on fire, burning, like again, civil war. People were talking on social media about it. And then in Israel, there's an operation in Jenin against identified terrorists. Okay, so we're not talking civilians, where every effort was made by the military to save lives and to make sure that no civilians were killed, and none were killed, none. And you have a BBC presenter that goes and says the IDF enjoys killing children, and you're like, excuse me, what? You have a police officer in France, and I'm not saying he's guilty because we don't know, who killed a 17-year-old. The definition of it, he's a minor, he's a child. Under the law, he's a child.
Yes.
No one challenges that. But then you have a BBC presenter making a comment on Jenin, where no civilians were killed, but terrorists were killed because they were terrorists, and so they were fighting against the military with the intention of claiming civilian lives and innocent lives in Israel. And she goes on TV and says, the IDF enjoys killing children. Are you kidding me? First of all, the use of the blood libel is despicable. But the fact that she would normalize and apologize for terrorism by arguing age and saying that he was a minor and that Israel should be ashamed of itself. Are you kidding me? Because I'm sorry, were you not part of the operation in Iraq and you carpet bombed the country and 1 million people died, including children? You want to make that comment? You want to justify the operations in Afghanistan? You want to make that comment? Do you understand? And I was thinking, like, we need to change the way that we look at things. And I'm not trying to do, oh, what about this? But there's clearly, a bias. There's clearly a way to describe certain situations depending on where they happen to serve a certain, I would say, either political goal or some kind of a mind construct, to kind of like justify a certain prejudice against a certain demographic for whatever reason. But we need to be able to actually look at fact and say, listen, whenever lives is being claimed, I'm talking about innocent lives. I'm not talking about that of a terrorist, because for me, and I'm sorry to say people may disagree with me, if someone preaches death upon the innocent, they sit themselves outside of humanity. And therefore, your right as a person have been suspended as far as I'm concerned. Because if you behave like I wouldn't say an animal, but if you behave like some kind of a devil, where the sanctity of life matters not to you, then you're sitting yourself outside of humanity, and therefore whatever I need to do to deal with you in order to protect the innocent, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to suspend those rights, because you can't claim, you can't say I'm underage. It doesn't work this way, because your behavior, the acts that you want to carry, push you like way out of society. And so like whatever rules apply in normal time don't apply to you. I'm sorry to say, and people will disagree with me, and I'm okay with it. So no, to make the
So
apology of terrorism like that, not okay.
So what is the road ahead for France? Maybe we can now spend a little bit of time on that, and then I'll ask you the live viewers questions, because there are many of them
So,
too. Like, how does France deal with this kind of an uprising? Because obviously it is, from how you're stating that. Like, how did the French media also report this? Were there heated discussions in the French media, or were they just trying to bury it under the?
no, look, because again, everyone started talking about immigration, talking about poverty, talking about Islamophobia, saying that they wanted to turn it into something that, in my mind, it was not. Trying again to not hold those people accountable and just to find excuses for them and say, oh, but they did this because, well, I don't care. I don't care. I mean, there's a point where we're going to have to say, I don't care, because you can't do this. You can't say I was drunk, therefore, I don't know, I raped someone. Well, I'm sorry, but like, being under the influence doesn't apologize the act. So, we need to stop again trying to infantilize people and saying that, oh, just because, they are immigrants, or they come from wherever, or they are Muslim, therefore they can't be guilty. Why? They are guilty. I'm not saying that means that guilt extends to the entire, the entirety of like, the Middle East or North Africa or even Islam. It's not true. But individuals are responsible. And we can't also deny the fact that, again, there's a common thread. They have a common denominator. And we need to look at, again, not blaming the faith, because that would be stupid to do so, but to understand that people, ideologues behind, the youth, indoctrinated and radicalized an entire demographic, and we haven't caught it. So the responsibility is also on us to say, like, we missed something for sure, because we were too busy trying to say, challenging people, or actually saying that there's an issue that is developing, we could see it, or is racist. Look, I think that everyone agrees that immigration is a good thing, always. No country can thrive without immigration. That's just a reality. You need immigration, the right kind. And when I say the right kind, I'm not talking about, we have to, we have to limit to like white people because, it's the UK or it's France. No, everyone is welcome, but you have to understand that you can't just welcome anybody all the time and just make it like chaotic, because that means that you're going to harm society. Like, you need to be, you need to invite in who you need, what you need, how you need it, because people also need to have a chance to, to make a home, in this new home. And that means like resources. So you can't just say, oh, whatever, let's go 10 million, in one day. That's going to work. No. We need to think this through. And it's okay to say that, a country has the right and the privilege to actually decide who comes in. I know it's hard to say, and I know sometimes it sucks and it's not nice, but that's the reality. We need to be pragmatic. We need to stop trying to be nice to people, because it doesn't work. Politicians are not there to be nice. They're there to lead. There's a difference, and we need to learn the difference. And I am, I'm all for, accepting asylum seekers. I'm all for helping people. What I would like to see happen is that rather than, use asylum seeking or, the status of refugees as the solution to a problem, I would love for us to actually be working on how do we make sure that no refugees exist ever. I don't want to see people to have to leave their home because of a war, because of a famine, because of a whatever. What about we help them in their country? Because a lot of people who do flee don't want to go anywhere. They love their country, they want to stay, but they don't have a choice. So, they have to immigrate. Why don't we work together to make sure that those people don't have to leave? What about that? Because in my mind, that would be the better solution, to make sure that, for example, in Africa or in Yemen or wherever a tragedy happened, that actually, how do we fix it? How do we help you stay? How do we give you the resources that you need right now to make sure that your society can be rebuilt, and that you don't have to, to outroot your entire family and cut ties with a country that actually, you love very much and you attach to, and put you in a place that is so foreign to you that it's going to take you 1 or 2 generations to even understand it. This is what I don't understand. And the debate is never going in that direction. To say, why do we have to look at the problem at the very end of it when there's a crisis? Why can't we try to project ourselves in the future and say, how do we help people to, not move when they don't want to? And those who do want to move are those that we need to make our society stronger. And that works both ways, by the way. You have a lot of immigration, for example, towards the UAE. They don't accept everybody. There's a quota, there's certain criteria that you have to meet, otherwise they don't need you. And I think that it should be okay for a country to say, we're going to welcome X amount of people, and we need those people following those criteria. It doesn't make you a bad person, it just makes you a very pragmatic person.
So, okay, one last question, and then I'll get into the viewers' questions also. Now, there is a lot of hyperventilating on social media. Doomsday scenarios have been peddled about how the French Republic has fallen. France is all gone. There is nothing left. France is over, Catherine. There's no such thing as France anymore. Everybody has declared France is over. Okay, I get the riots have happened. But can you tell people France will be back, and all right, we'll deal
Look,
with this?
France, look, again, people, I know people they love to be dramatic and say, oh my God, it's the end of the Republic. I don't know, maybe we're going to have a sixth Republic. It's possible, because there's clearly something, wrong with this one. But it's not the end of the Republic. France will still be France. France is not going anywhere. France is an old country. And I think this is the one thing that people don't understand, because we live in a society where everything is instant all the time and things get, outdated in a second. France has roots. So it will take, look, we had 2 world wars, several empires, many wars, many, that destroyed it, and we came back. So, riots, I'm sorry to say, yes, dramatic, horrible. And people were hurt. But the Republic is not going anywhere. The French democracy is not dead. I think it's going to take a lot more, than President Macron and his weird reforms, to actually shake, our democracy. And even though people love to say so, I don't believe it to be true, because the French are still there. And as it turns out, we do love our democracy. So we'll fight for it if we have to. But, I'd like us to stay civilized while doing so.
Keyword civilized. A journalist once said a very beautiful line. He said, being civilized is an learned and acquired taste. Not everybody can have it.
It's true. And also, people don't understand that violence, okay, for me, is never the solution, because you're engaging in dynamics that are, by definition, destructive. Nothing good will come out of that. People need to just take a chill pill, have a conversation, and again, find a solution that works. Just stop violence. What are you going to achieve? You might get to where you want to go faster, but the journey is toxic, and you will pay the price for that later. So I think that we need to. For me, it's not so much how quickly we get there; it's just the way that we do it. We need to learn we need to learn to disagree. And I think that, a lot of the time when people do marriage counseling, they actually learn, there's an art in arguing. Like, you need to learn how to argue effectively, not to just to lock yourself in this kind of, toxic dynamic. And I think that's what we need to learn. We need to learn that, we have to learn how to argue, to be pragmatic, to try to also not put our feelings into it, because it's not useful. And again, solutions. Let's aim for solutions. Let's not get bogged down by stupid disagreements about, I don't know, whether or not you like someone's hair, or you just like whatever. And also, I think the biggest thing for me is that this tendency that we have, if we decide that we don't like a particular political party or state official or politician, even when they say the right thing, we want to disagree with them on account that, but I don't like you. I don't care. If someone is saying something that works and is true, take it. Don't be the idiot that said, but I don't like you. I don't care. It's not the point. If the person is actually saying something that is true and that could actually help towards finding the solution, by all means, take it, listen, because even very stupid people say clever things sometimes.
Yeah, it's the weight of the point that matters, not from the mouth or the person it comes from.
Exactly. But we have a tendency now to say, oh my God, Marine Le Pen said she said something that is right, but I can't agree with her because she's Marine Le Pen. No, I mean, I don't care who you are. If what you're saying works, fine. Let's go. Let's do it.
So you did mention Marine Le Pen. Now, do you
Mm.
think she benefits from these riots
Oh,
politically?
good Lord, yes. Dramatically. Oh, look, I'm going to tell you something. Not a fan, okay? Not a fan at all. But I have to say that when she goes on social media and she said things that was bang on. They were bang on. She told the truth. She stated facts, and look, I don't agree with like 90% of whatever it is she's saying, but sometimes, she's not a stupid person, and sometimes she put the finger on something that is true. And her solutions sometimes are actually potentially the good ones. She's like, her popularity is exploding because, again, a lot of people recognize themselves in her because she's saying some of the things that people don't want to say in France because it's not popular, but she's been saying it for a long time. And so she's getting in popularity. It's actually troubling because you're thinking, hang on a second, since when do we think that the far right in France is actually the alternative? It's actually really, really scary. And what scares me the most is just like I said, sometimes she was actually saying things that I found myself to agree with, and I'm thinking like, wow. I mean, we have fallen really, really far, for her to be the voice of reason. That's scary. Again, I don't agree with her party politics at all, but some of the things that she came out saying were right, and a lot of people, are kind of connecting with that now, and a lot of people have expressed, views that they're gonna vote for her next time because they're thinking like, we tried everything else, it didn't work, so let's try her, and that is very scary because when that happens in a democracy, you're thinking, so what's the next station? Like, where do we stop next? If the far right become, I would say, the norm, where they become actually like a tolerable possibility,
Far right with these internet spying laws. Best of luck.
it's just going to be like, it's going to be fascism on crack.
Yeah.
But yeah. But look, a lot of the time what people don't understand is that democracy is very fragile. It's a very fragile ecosystem, and that it's so, look, every fascist state started off as a democracy. Let's just put it that way. So there's a tendency for democracy to kind of go that way if we're not careful. So it's a balancing act, and I think that right now we lose it.
Yeah. It's scary, but
Mm.
okay. Let's take the views on the questions. So a lot of immigration questions. So basically, they go around thoughts on. Do you think France should now start getting a much more tougher or improved immigration system, something like Canada and Australia and New Zealand have like a point system, or maybe something like the United Arab Emirates does. They don't let people naturalize, they can work there. So what do you think the French government is going to do?
Well, I think actually I would like to see a mix of two things, is quotas, because I think it's important. For example, in the health system. I mean, there's a lack of nurses and doctors and things like this. So I think that definitely they should gear immigration towards that to kind of fill that need, to make sure that France can actually cater to its people and make sure that they have the healthcare that they deserve. To make sure that, because you have high unemployment, but you have certain industries, for example, IT, they can't find people to hire. So it's hampering growth. So to make sure that, again, quotas, I think like what Canada does, what you said in Australia, I think is great. And I think they should do that. Now, also, at the same time, I think that they need to look at, it's not so much who comes in. It's the way that, again, you frame, I would say, the national narrative, in the sense that you have to make people, I don't like to say make people, but how do you instill some kind of social cohesion and a love for the republic, to kind of like teach people in the ways of the republic, in terms like for them to feel that they now becoming part of this, like this common history that people have, because it seems to be working for a lot of like there's a lot of people coming out of Asia or Africa that feel French, very, very French, and the French accept them as French, but it's just like this one demographic. There's a problem, and I think it comes from this notion that Islam is at war with the West, and so like we need to find a way to just kind of like address that, and And maybe then immigration would be a lot easier from those countries, because again, like the problem is coming out of the Islamic world. It's not coming out of like people moving from Latin America. It's not. And it again, I'm not passing judgment. There's just a reality. Numbers tells you that that's true. So we need to find a way. How do we? There's a problem of communication somewhere. We need to address it, because again, I think that immigration is a strength when it's done the right way. And I think that we should make room for everybody, but at the same time, it needs to be thought out well, and we need to make sure that there's a structure in place that allows for people to be able to. It's not necessary to adopt, to suddenly start drinking wine and eating croissant in the morning. It doesn't matter. But how do I help you feel French, so that you would bring your own, your culture and your tradition to enrich my my country? How do we do that? How do we have a positive exchange where you bring me and then you take from me too, and we become a better together? Because I think that's what immigration does. I mean, look, France went through a lot of immigration movements, but the thing is, usually it was done kind of like laterally. So it was like, from Ukraine, from Poland, from Russia. It was like, throughout the Judeo-Christian world, we never had like south to north, really. That's kind of like over the past, I would say, 80 years. It happened because of the colonies. But we never learned to speak that language, so we could do that. That was fine. Italian coming to France, and French people going to Italy, no problem. And I don't think it's just I think it's a culture thing. This we knew how to speak to each other and to kind of like enrich each other's lives. This north to south hasn't worked out. It's a very toxic relationship, and we need to fix it, because it's a shame. It's a shame. We have a lot to learn from each other.
Yeah. The thing is, unlike America and Canada, France or Germany, basically the European Union,
Mm.
in a major way, these countries, each of these countries have their distinct culture. Now, immigration into France is very different from immigration into Canada, barring Quebec, which is French. So
Well, they claim to speak French, but sometimes I don't understand
they
it.
say they're more French than you guys.
I know. It's all right. Wait. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Because I think they're great people, but it just makes me laugh because sometimes they're like, "I speak French. I'm from." I said, "I don't understand it." You can. I'm sure you
Yeah.
do speak French. I just don't understand your accent. Probably
By the
my fault.
way, my brother-in-law, he speaks very fluently in French, and he told me this, that the French that the Quebecois speak and the
Yeah.
French that the people in France speak has a lot of slang. He's like, I would
Yeah.
find it so hard to understand the French in France, because they would
Yeah.
have these slang words, and I would speak this ancient archaic French that the Quebecois would speak. And it was very
Yeah, that's
interesting.
true. That's true. Maybe that's why they say they like more French than us, because we kind of like we like
Yeah.
absorbed a lot of things, and we don't speak, like, I would say, classical French. So maybe they master it better than we do.
Yeah, but then this, if assimilation is a problem, then why the European Union in general is not getting its head around this entire migrant issue? Like, why is it become such a problem and a touchy subject to even talk about it? That, I mean, look at the result. You have right wing parties popping up in Europe all the time. You had the Quran burning incident now recently in Sweden. Now,
Mm.
I'm a disbeliever. I criticize religion. I don't understand this whole Quran burning incident. I would never do it myself personally, but
Yeah.
I am a free speech guy. So if somebody wants to burn a Hindu, Christian, Muslim religious text, not my thing, but I will not stop them either. But but then how does one thread this needle, right? Because it's not like assimilating in America. America has its unique way, which is where America should be given credit. People who come to America, they literally Americanize. America
Mm.
has this overarching powerful entity that even today, after the wokeism, is not being destroyed completely.
But do you know why, though? Because again, we don't talk about this. Is that most people who do immigrate to America actually love America. They want to do well when they go to America. It's not like they're not. A lot of people are actually quite desperate to go to America. It's one of the, it's like, I would say, if you were to make a poll, I'm pretty sure that if you ask people where would you like to move, most people would say America, just instinctively. Because there's this notion that the American dream is that you go there and you're going to become successful, and and all those things. And for some reason, people who again go to the EU, do it for different reasons. It's not out of love or a desire to do better necessarily. I'm not saying that that's not true for some people. I'm sure it is, but I would say that a lot of people go there with this kind of like post-colonial PTSD problem, where there's like either like some degree of like you owe me because you colonized me like once upon a time, or I hate you, so I'm gonna milk the system and get what I feel I'm entitled to because again, once upon a time, I was colonized. It's just like again those dynamic of hatred and violence, and it doesn't happen in America. Also, America doesn't have a social system. So people, going to America, that you're going to be on your own and you're going to have to work hard to get somewhere. And so people go there with that in mind. And I think that the way that they immigrate into the European continent is very, very different. The mindset is different. And I think that's what we need to talk about, because it's not a racial issue, and people are making it a racial issue. And I think it's just the easy way out, because you're just trying to shut people up. But we have to talk about it. For me, it's not racial, it's not even religious. Although we need to address Islamic radicalism, because ideologues have used that, this racist Islamophobic button to kind of like justify, the argument for violence and retribution against the French Republic. We need to talk about mindsets. How do we make sure that there's a conversation that happens really early on, and we make sure that people come. When people come, they come with the desire to build themselves up and build a better life for themselves, and we can assist them, we can help them along the way, but we can't create a state of, I would say, like permanent assistance. That's not healthy. You can't just you have like what they say about teaching people how to fish so they can feed themselves every day. So we need to change the way that we do things. It's just giving people handout. It's just not healthy, and I think it creates we see the results like a few decades down the line, and you have the riots, because again people feel entitled. No accountability.
So do you think these riots will result in the French state doubling down on their
Yeah.
the liberty, equality, fraternity concept in France is like a very it's a very state imposed thing. Like do you think it will now be even more imposed, as in this is, look, the one thing I admired about France was when that unfortunate beheading or shooting happened at Charlie Hebdo. The one thing the French state did was put up the Charlie Hebdo poster all over France. Now that's how you respond to bullies. You
Yes.
don't bow down to bullies. So do you think the French state, irrespective of who is in power after these humongous riots, are going to double down and uh, respond in a very different way? Because I mean, as you said, the police has, nobody talks about the police response. The police response has been something in France.
Well, they're angry. Well, I see a few things happening. Like I said, I think there's a resurgence in nationalism, where people actually feel more French now than yesterday, because as a reaction to what happened, because it's a visceral reaction. I also think that unfortunately, and that I don't think it's going to help, but I think you're going to see like police officers being granted extra rights, and that means that it could potentially lead to more violence. I think that you're going to have a standoff between the state and the suburbs. I mean, there's been, for example, talks about removing, social benefits to families, on account that, if certain members of the family rioted, then they would have to pay the price. Which again, I don't know where I stand on this one, because I don't believe in collective punishment. I think it's unfair.
Absolutely.
But I don't know. I understand the rationale behind it, that they have to, you break it, you fix it. I understand that, but how do you like that? And the mom hasn't done anything, and they say, well, the parents are responsible. Yes, to some extent, but this is that you also punishing the other children. I don't think it's helping. I mean, I think it's a stupid suggestion. I think we need to do better. But I do like the idea of accountability and forcing those people to actually, like, you broke it, now you go and fix it. I think we should. I'm not talking about hard labor, but I think they should do community service for sure. Like, you go fix it. You go understand what is it that you've done, and try to be held accountable and fix yourself, for the love of God. Like, just don't be an idiot for the rest of your life. Don't break, just build. Breaking is so easy. I mean, any idiot could do it. Building something, it takes, takes actually courage. So they might want to do that. But I'm not feeling very positive, because all I see is that, the next elections we could have the far right win. That's my worry, is that it's going to lead France in that direction. I don't know,
So
because again, we're not having the right debates. I'm not saying that I have the answers to everything, but I can see, I can pinpoint certain areas that we should look into. Nobody is doing it, and I don't understand. I mean, I know it's gonna, again, hard conversation, not fun. I get it, but we're gonna have to have them, because otherwise, in 5 years, 2 years, 6 months, gonna happen again, and it's gonna get worse.
So I'm going to paraphrase a few questions together. So now that we know time and again in Europe, multiculturalism has failed as a state policy, how, why do you see these denials? And also, a lot of it is also, you cannot deny the role of the Western world, especially Anglo-American foreign policy, which many Western countries signed up to. I know France has had its bones of contention with America on multiple occasions, but it's like a mixture of that in today's world. Now, do you see eventually these realities playing out, and somebody from the center left or the center right, I'm not talking about the far left and the far right, because whenever the far left and the far right comes to power, shit hits the roof. But when will the center left and the center right parties start saying it how it's supposed to be said, that multiculturalism has failed, morality is objective, some
Mhm,
cultures have better values than other cultures, and those cultures that have better values should tell the people that if you want to live in our culture, you have to assimilate, and if you can't assimilate, then please stay, if you like, your back in the place. And I say this as an Indian. If I move to Canada, there are some values in India that are better than Canada.
mhm,
I keep them. There are some Canadian values that are genuinely better than India. I
mhm,
take them. And that's how I become a better Canadian and better Indian.
mhm.
Why is it so hard to say?
I don't know. Maybe you should say it louder for the people in the back. That's true. I agree with you. I agree with you. But this is what I was talking about, like this give and take. This is why immigration is so amazing, because you come, you come with your Indian culture, with an, the history of a country that is old, and has evolved. And so you have a very strong family unit, something that we have lost here. We need that.
Absolutely.
We need that.
Absolutely. And
Um,
by the way, Indians have the similar family unit consistency in America. Just look at the numbers: highest number of married couples,
I know, because it works.
stable marriages, lowest
Yeah,
divorce rates, etc.
yeah, because it works. It works. Clearly you find a model that works. I mean, across time it has, it's like it's been proven, and so you kept it, because what why throw away a model that works, right? And so we need that. So it would be wonderful if, like, we could actually have an honest conversation and say, okay, well, so we have people coming out of India that, have very successful family lives. The family unit works. There's, those dynamics are very healthy. Why can't we learn and take, absorb them and just claim them for our own? We're not doing that. But we also have this assumption that everything that is Western is better. And I think that's not true. That's just not true. And so we need to have this conversation and say, let's put ourselves in check too, because we might be, this beacon of freedom. Yeah, that was true 100 years ago. There are the beacons now. Okay, we're not the only one that, can define democracy. And also, I think that democracy could be iterated in very different ways, and maybe all ways are not the best ways. So again, I think that if we were to engage and communicate with other people, which is often, the way out of problems, and realize that we don't know everything, and some of the stuff that we do is wrong. So what about fixing it? And I think that maybe we should look into how other countries have handled, immigration and multiculturalism, because we think we have, again, the solution because we're Western. I think that's a mistake. We don't necessarily have the solution at all. So how do other countries have dealt with it? If you take a country like Russia, for example, and I'm not making an allegory for Vladimir Putin, but Russia has countless ethnicities within the greater whole, countless, various faiths, and for some reason it seems to work. There's some kind of a social cohesion there, and there's been a lot of, like, migrant movements. So maybe we should look into, like, why is it that it works for them? India, you have, different languages, different, I would say, almost like, subcultures within the greater culture. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. How is that working? Because, people still say, I'm Indian, right? So maybe look into this and say, like, can we learn from you guys? Like, what is it? What have you done or not done that maybe we should not do or do? Yeah, I think those conversation needs to happen. Because look, our world is getting smaller because everybody
Yes.
moves everywhere, we travel everywhere. So we're going to have to figure it out. And you can't just say, I'm just going to lock you out. It doesn't work. Not, I mean, it could work maybe like 200 years ago. It doesn't work anymore. You can't lock people out. So you're going to have to find room and make room for them. But make sure that it's like, again, it's a give and take. And also, I think that people need to be less attached to, what they perceive to be their identity. And because it's a fluid thing, it evolves. And so, like, what does it make a French person French? Is it like drinking wine, eating cheese, and having pastries every day? No, I think there's something that must be deeper than that, right? So that means that sometimes you have to put yourself in check and say, can I adopt, the good things of, another culture? And the answer should be yes. If it works, if it's better, then take it.
Fair enough. And you are right. We are living in a global world because right now two of us are having a conversation. I'm an Indian podcaster hosting this podcast in Canada. You're a French you're a French woman talking
A
to me
Jewish,
from
a
England.
Jewish man, women. I mean, like we
Jewish
literally
French
covered.
women
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
to me
We
in
covered
England.
everything. I know,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and we speak in English.
yeah. We're speaking in English. We're not speaking in our native tongues.
I know, crazy. No, and look, we have very different kind of like background, and like and we agree on most things. Isn't
Yep,
that crazy? Isn't that
yep.
crazy? And some people would love to say like, oh, those two people can't possibly agree. Yes, we can because it's just we're willing to actually listen to each other and learn that maybe my way is not the best way, and vice versa.
Yeah,
It's not that difficult. If people want, again, really not that difficult. It's just like stop being so prideful.
yeah.
Just nobody knows everything.
I agree with you, and this is the beauty of the internet. Yes, you get a lot of people who abuse you, but I have met some of the most interesting people in my life because of the internet. The internet has been a blessing. So before we
Mm.
wrap it up, Catherine, are there any last words you want to say before we wrap it up?
No, other than people. Let's. I want people to get out of this. Those racist dynamics. Let's not play the racist card anymore because I actually don't believe that racism is a real thing anymore. I mean, it is unlike like I would say like the very end of radicalism, whether right or left. But I think that there's been look, no one is ever one thing anymore. And so many people have this background, that background, a grandma, an auntie, or whatever. You can't. Nobody can claim to like purity of like one particular thing. So just get over yourself. Like it doesn't matter. Just let's just talk about people, real issues, because I'm so sick and tired of talking about racism. It prevents us from actually having real conversation because it's just like this kind of like barrier, and then people's like, oh no, I can't say what I want to say, what I need to say. So let's just stop playing that card. It's a stupid card.
I couldn't agree more. As long as your intent is right and the points you make are rational, I don't care what color of the skin you are. I will listen to it and I'll agree or disagree with you. Make arguments without these things. But I guess the global left has become woke, and the global left has a problem. They're obsessed with identity. They moved from individualism. I did not, or you did not. That's the problem.
Well, wait until people start to, identify as oh, actually, people have done it when they identify as a black person or this person, and I mean, like, it's gonna
Oh,
start.
Rachel Dolezal has already shown that.
There you go. No, I mean, so it just no, but it actually it proves my point is that color doesn't matter. It's just who cares. I mean, if you switch off the light, we kind of like we don't know. So there you go. So like you just like it's such a stupid argument to say, oh, because you come from this country, then therefore you must be a bad person. It's such a stupid thing to say. I just want people to move on from it. Like, please, enough. Like we've done this for centuries. It's stupid. It's
It is.
completely irrational. Well, I mean, we like we bleed the same, we build the same way, we got the same organs. Move on.
Yep. I agree with you, and I think that's the best way to end this podcast. Catherine, as always, it's a pleasure talking to you, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in London this time.
Oh yeah, because you're coming, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
there in
maybe we should
October.
do some kind of a live, kind of like, in person podcast. That'd be fun.
Yes, we should. That we'll make something happen. So,
Okay.
as always, thank you very much for coming.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
All right, guys, you can follow Catherine on social media. Her Twitter account is in the description of the podcast. You can also go and read. She writes on multiple places. She was with Henry Jackson. Now she's moved on to some other place. She also writes for the Jerusalem Post. So you just have to Google Catherine and you'll see all the details over there, and go check her work out. Also, if you like this video, please subscribe to the Cārvāka podcast YouTube channel if you've not. Leave a comment in the comments subsection. If you can support this podcast monetarily, do become a member. The membership program is what runs this podcast every month. So whether you're on YouTube or Patreon or Fanmo, please become a member. If you're an audio listener, do leave a rating on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, wherever, whatever audio platform you listen to this, or send your donations to UPI or buy the merchandise of the Cārvāka podcast. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, namaste, take care, bye.